You'll get nothing but dust. My daughter-in-law let the sentence slide across the lacquered table like a knife. The conference room smelled of old paper and lemon polish. The air conditioner hummed. The blinds rattled in the dry noon wind. I watched her smile without showing teeth, a smile that said she knew exactly where every asset would land. Please, I said quietly, folding my hands. Let the attorney finish. The attorney already did. She shot back. Your husband made it clear. End of 5. My son cleared his throat. Maybe we should stop buffering for her, she whispered to him, then turned to me. You lived here. You didn't build it. We did. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Hale, Mrs. Whitaker, if we could keep this civil. It is civil, she said. Civil law. And she gets nothing. I felt the chair's vinyl bite my palms. Is that what you want to tell the family? I asked. She leaned in, perfume sharp as grapefruit peel. I want to tell them the truth. You're done deciding things. The water pitcher cracked against its tray as she poured. Ice chimed. My son looked at his hands. The lawyer flipped a page and found no words. Dust. She had chosen that word because she thought I would crumble because dust can be brushed away without consequence. I understand, I said. If that's truly the record will stand. She blinked, puzzled by my tone. So you accept it? I accept that paper matters, I said. Dates, signatures, witnesses. Paper always matters. She laughed once, bright and brittle. Then you'll love what's in the file. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, I said to the camera inside my mind. To every woman who has been told to step aside. I did not raise my voice. I pressed 2 fingertips to the table's cool edge and breathed. Because 2 weeks from today, I told her, you will ask me for something. What could I possibly ask you for? She smirked. I let the lawyer close his folder. We'll let the law answer that. If you were in my seat, would you speak now or let silence write the first line of justice? My name is Margaret Hale, though most in town still call me Mrs. Hale out of respect for my late husband, Thomas. We spent nearly 40 years building the kind of life people admired from a distance. A sprawling house on Maplewood Lane, a small but steady family business, and a son who, at least in his childhood, was the center of both our worlds. Thomas was meticulous. He balanced accounts in longhand at the dining table, his spectacles sliding down his nose as he scribbled numbers in neat columns. I handled the house, the garden, and the little rituals that made our lives pleasant: Sunday dinners, holiday decorations, photo albums stacked high in the living room cabinet. Together, we believed we were crafting security not only for ourselves but for our children and grandchildren. But life doesn't always respect the structures you think are unshakable. When Thomas passed after a sudden stroke, I found myself staring at ledgers I could barely read and documents I hadn't thought to study. For the first time in decades, silence filled the hallways where his voice used to echo. I thought grief would be the hardest battle. I hadn't yet met the sharper weapon ambition disguised as family. My son, Daniel, brought Claire home on a warm June afternoon. She wore a sun-yellow dress, her laugh easy and confident. I remember noticing how firmly she held Daniel's arm, almost guiding him into the house instead of being led. Mrs. Hale, thank you for inviting me, she said, her eyes scanning the framed photographs on the wall before settling on me. Her handshake was firm, stronger than I expected. At first, I was relieved. Daniel had been quiet after college, drifting between jobs, unsure of his place. Claire injected energy into him. She made plans, set goals, spoke of futures with crisp certainty. I thought she would steady him, but within months of their marriage, her language shifted. Instead of, we're hoping to start something, it became, we deserve this. She talked of expansion, of moving into the house permanently, as though my presence were a temporary inconvenience. I continued my routines. I woke early, brewed coffee strong enough to bite the tongue, tended to the rose bushes that Thomas loved. I baked on Sundays apple pie with the lattice crust Daniel used to beg for. But now, the pies sat untouched, or worse, dismissed with Claire's careless words. We're trying to watch our sugar, Margaret. Maybe next time just fruit? She had begun calling me by my first name, clipped and professional, as though I were an employee rather than her husband's mother. Evenings became performances. Daniel, once eager to share stories, now spoke less, waiting for Claire to nod before he added anything. She dominated the conversation, often steering it toward money investments, property values, inheritance law. "You're fortunate this house hasn't lost its market value," she remarked one night, glancing at the crown molding. "Prime location, good square footage. It'll set us up well." Us. The word carved into me like a knife. It started with small requests. "Why don't you let us take over the bills? You shouldn't worry about utilities at your age." We could renovate the upstairs, turn it into an office. You don't use it, do you?" But beneath each suggestion was a current, a push to sideline me, to diminish my authority over the life Thomas and I had built. One evening, while clearing the table, I overheard her speaking to Daniel in the living room. "She doesn't need all this space. It's not practical. We could put it to better use. Don't you think she'd be happier in a smaller place?" My chest tightened, the dish towel damp in my hands. They spoke as if I were invisible. When the topic of inheritance first surfaced, I assumed it was premature chatter. Thomas's estate, though modest by some standards, was carefully outlined. He had left instructions, I believed, for fairness and stability. But Claire carried herself with the confidence of someone who already held the keys. She began speaking to relatives as though she were the new matriarch. At barbecues, she dropped casual hints. "When we get everything sorted, maybe we'll remodel the kitchen. When the property transfers, we'll definitely add a pool." The relatives glanced at me, uncomfortable, but no one contradicted her. Grief, at first, made me patient. I told myself she was young, perhaps overenthusiastic, eager to claim her place. But the patience frayed. One afternoon, while watering the garden, I found her on the phone, her voice sharp and animated. "Yes. Once it's in our name, we'll have collateral for the loan. Don't worry, the old woman can't contest it." The words thudded in my chest like stones. Old woman, collateral, loan. I stood silently behind the lilac bush until she noticed me. She smiled too brightly, hung up quickly, and said, "Just a friend from college. Nothing important." But I knew. I knew then that her vision for this family had no place for me except as a line item to be erased. The lawyer's letter arrived 2 months later. The official inheritance meeting. Family members summoned, documents to be reviewed, assets to be distributed. I placed the envelope on the kitchen table and traced Thomas's name on the seal. My heart pounded not with fear, but with a cold gathering resolve. Claire walked in, saw the letter, and smirked. "Finally. We can make this official." "Aller. Make what official?" I asked. "That you've had your turn," she said, pouring herself coffee into one of my porcelain cups. "And now it's ours." I wanted to shout. I wanted to throw the cup against the wall and let it shatter. But instead, I pressed my lips together and thought of Thomas's meticulous handwriting, his quiet warnings, his insistence that paperwork signed and sealed was stronger than pride. So I stayed silent. For the moment. As the day of the inheritance meeting drew near, the house seemed to tilt slightly, as though waiting for a storm to crack its beams. Claire walked its halls like a queen surveying her kingdom. Daniel followed her shadow. I cooked, I cleaned, I watered the roses. Outwardly, I remained steady, but inside, I sharpened my patience into a blade. Because I knew something she did not. Thomas had trusted me enough to tell me where the final papers were hidden. And when the storm broke, I would be ready. The day of the inheritance meeting settled over me like a heavy curtain. I woke before dawn, the house still and cold, and sat at the edge of my bed listening to the silence. My fingers traced the quilt Thomas and I had chosen together years ago. He had always said that fabric remembers the warmth of the people it covers. That morning, I couldn't feel his warmth, only the sharp edge of loneliness pressing against my ribs. I dressed carefully. Not in mourning black, but in a simple navy dress that carried dignity without drama. I wanted to show them, and myself, that I was not fragile dust ready to be brushed away. I carried Thomas's fountain pen in my purse, a small act of rebellion, though I doubted anyone would notice. When I stepped outside, the air was cool, scented faintly of cut grass from the neighbor's lawn. The sky was washed gray, like paper waiting for ink. At the courthouse, the conference room gleamed with the sterile shine of furniture polished too often. The long table reflected the fluorescent lights above, and the blinds rattled each time a draft slipped in. Mr. Carter, the attorney, sat with folders neatly stacked, his glasses sliding down the bridge of his nose. He looked up when I entered, his expression softening. "Mrs. Hale," he greeted. "I'm glad you're here early." "I wanted to gather myself before the storm," I replied. His eyes flicked toward the door, as if he already knew what storm I meant. And then they arrived. Claire was first, of course, heels clicking, chin high, lipstick red as a warning sign. She wore a cream blazer that looked more like armor than clothing, and behind her trailed my son Daniel, shoulders curved inward, his gaze avoiding mine. Claire greeted the room with the confidence of someone convinced the script was already written in her favor. "Right on time," she announced, glancing at her watch. "We wouldn't want to keep anyone waiting. These matters are best settled quickly." I folded my hands in my lap. "Yes," I said softly. "Quick can be good. Or dangerous." She gave me a long look, the corners of her mouth twitching with the beginnings of a smirk, but she said nothing. Mr. Carter cleared his throat and began to read. His voice was steady as he moved through the will. The family home, the business accounts, the retirement savings. Each line felt like a stone dropped into a pond, rippling outward. Claire's nails tapped the table impatiently, the rhythm sharp and deliberate, like a countdown. When Mr. Carter read the line about the family home remaining in the Hale family's possession, she interrupted, her voice bright. "That means us, Daniel and me. We'll maintain it. And I." "Let him finish," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, eyes flicking between us. Mr. Carter continued. "However, the rights of occupancy are to be determined in accordance with the surviving spouse's wishes." A hush settled. My pulse beat against my throat. For the first time since Thomas's death, I felt a flicker of safety. He had remembered me. He had left space for me to breathe. Claire's smile faltered, but only for a second. "So she can stay," she said quickly. "That's fine. We'll work around it." The reading moved on. Some funds earmarked for charitable donations, a gesture Thomas had often spoken of with pride. At this, Claire leaned forward, her lips curling. She looked at me directly, her voice pitched loud enough for the entire room. "Well," she said, "looks like you'll get nothing but dust." The words struck me like the slam of a door. Dust. The choice was deliberate, cruel, meant to diminish me into something weightless, irrelevant. I felt relatives shift uneasily in their seats, some looking down, others darting quick glances at me. Even Daniel muttered, "Claire, don't," but his voice was weak, half-hearted. I sat still, gripping the edge of the chair until my knuckles ached. My throat burned with humiliation, yet I refused to let my voice break. "Paper matters," I whispered, just loud enough to be heard. "And it will speak." Her smirk widened, certain I was bluffing. The lawyer closed the folder with a snap, announcing the session over. Relatives filed out, their footsteps echoing in the hallway. Some avoided my gaze, perhaps unwilling to confront the ugliness of what they had witnessed. Others touched my arm gently, small gestures of sympathy that barely scratched the surface of my despair. Claire glided through the group like a hostess at a victory party, thanking people as though she had already won. Daniel lingered at the door, looking at me with the eyes of a boy caught between mother and wife. "Mom," he said quietly, "maybe we can talk later." "I hope so," I replied. The tremor in my voice betrayed me. When the room emptied, I remained seated at the long table, staring at the wood grain as though it might offer answers. Mr. Carter placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Mrs. Hale," he said softly, "Thomas trusted you. Don't forget that." The words clung to me as I drove home, the silence of the car pressing in. I parked beneath the oak tree, the branches trembling in the wind, and sat for several minutes before gathering the strength to step inside. The house greeted me with its usual creaks and sighs, but that night the air felt heavier. I wandered into Thomas's study, the scent of his cologne still lingering faintly in the curtains. His desk sat as he had left it, neat stacks of papers, his pen holder aligned, his leather chair pulled close. My hand hesitated at the top drawer. He had once told me, half in passing, that the real truth always lives in the paperwork. I hadn't understood then. Now, the memory pressed against my chest. The drawer stuck at first, but with a firm tug, it opened. Beneath layers of tax records, I found a slim folder bound with string. My fingers trembled as I lifted it free, the dust motes swirling in the lamplight. I sat down, untied the string, and opened the folder. Inside lay a supplemental will, signed and notarized only weeks before his death. My eyes scanned the words, tears welling. The house was secured for me for life, the business accounts locked in a trust beyond Claire's reach, and savings bonds set aside for grandchildren yet to come. Thomas had thought ahead. He had known what I would face. Relief flooded me, but anger quickly followed. She had mocked me, told me I would receive nothing but dust, while all along Thomas had safeguarded me with ink and signatures. I pressed the document to my chest and whispered, "You saw this coming, didn't you, Thomas?" The night deepened. Rain began to tap against the windows, steady and insistent. I sat in the study for hours, reading every line, memorizing every clause. Each page felt like a shield pressed into my hands. By midnight, I knew one thing with clarity. She believed she held the upper hand, but her arrogance had blinded her. The storm outside was only beginning, and soon it would find its way through the walls she thought she had built. The morning after I discovered the supplemental will, the house felt different, as if the walls themselves exhaled in quiet relief. I placed the folder back in the drawer, this time locking it with a small brass key that Thomas had left dangling on the bookshelf. My heart pounded with the knowledge of what I held, but I kept my face calm, my steps measured. The secret was mine for now, and secrets are strongest when carried in silence. When I walked into the kitchen, Claire was already there, pouring herself coffee from my pot. She turned, smiling too brightly. "Morning, Margaret. Daniel and I were just talking. We're thinking of converting the den into a guest suite. Perfect for when we start hosting." I reached for a mug and poured myself a cup, letting the steam rise between us like a curtain. "You're making plans quickly," I said evenly. Her eyes gleamed. "Of course. This place is practically ours already." She sipped her coffee, then added, almost as an afterthought, "Once the refinance goes through, we'll finally have breathing room." My hand froze halfway to the sugar jar. "Refinance?" I asked softly. She blinked, realizing her slip. "I mean, if we ever decide to refinance. Nothing is settled yet." She waved her hand dismissively, but her tone was sharp, defensive. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the liquid swirl. "You should be careful with loans. Paper has a way of remembering promises." Her smile flickered. For the first time, a crack appeared in her confidence. That evening, I found Daniel in the garage, sorting through old tools. The air smelled of oil and cedar, familiar and grounding. I leaned against the doorframe. "Son, may I ask you something?" He didn't look up. "Of course, Mom. Do you truly believe your father intended for me to leave this house so soon?" Daniel set down a hammer, rubbed his temples. "Mom, it's not about that. Claire just thinks we need to secure our future. She's trying to make things easier." "Easier for whom?" I asked quietly. He sighed. "You don't understand. Times are different. We have debts, plans, opportunities. She's just practical." At my expense?" My voice cracked. He turned away, shoulders tense. "I don't want to argue." The silence between us stretched like a canyon. I saw the boy I raised, the one who used to run barefoot in the yard, now swallowed by the shadow of his wife's ambition. My chest ached, not only from betrayal but from the loss of the son I once knew. Days passed, and whispers reached me from neighbors. At the market, Mrs. Caldwell approached, clutching her grocery bag. "I hear you might be moving out soon," she said, her eyes darting nervously. "Moving out?" I repeated, startled. "Yes. Claire mentioned it. She said you'd be downsizing and she and Daniel would take over here. People are talking." The words burned. She had already declared my departure as fact, weaving it into conversations as if it were inevitable. My cheeks flushed with shame, though I had done nothing wrong. One evening, I returned from tending the roses to find Claire waiting in the living room. Papers lay neatly spread across the coffee table. She stood beside them, her arms crossed, a smile playing at her lips. Margaret, she began. We need you to sign these. Just formalities, transfer of utilities, some bank authorizations. It'll simplify things for everyone. I approached slowly, picked up the first page. My eyes scanned the words, and my stomach tightened. It was a power of attorney document, giving them control over financial decisions. Do you think I don't read? I asked, my voice low, steady. Her smile thinned. It's just paperwork. I set the page down carefully. Paper always matters. Her eyes hardened, the pleasant mask slipping. You can make this easy, or you can make it hard. But either way, you're not the one in charge anymore. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced myself to breathe evenly. We'll see about that, I said, and walked away, leaving the papers untouched. That night, rain streaked the windows, the house groaning beneath the storm. I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, Thomas's pen clutched in my hands. For the first time, doubt overwhelmed me. Could I really withstand her schemes? She was younger, bolder, with Daniel firmly under her influence. Perhaps it would be easier to surrender, to find a smaller place, to live quietly without the constant struggle. I pressed the pen to my lips and whispered, Thomas, you always believed in me, but what if I'm not strong enough? Lightning flashed, illuminating the mantel where our wedding photo stood. Thomas's eyes, captured in black and white, seemed to look directly at me, calm and unwavering. The thunder rolled, and in its echo, I heard his voice as clearly as if he were still alive. Trust the paper. Trust yourself. I rose from the couch, the weight in my chest lifting slightly. Upstairs, in the locked drawer, the folder waited. It was more than a stack of pages. It was proof, protection, power. I realized then that surrender would be the true betrayal not only of myself, but of Thomas's foresight. He had prepared for this very storm, leaving me the tools to withstand it. As I climbed the stairs, the floorboards creaking under my steps, I felt a clarity settle over me. Claire thought I was nothing but dust. She had no idea that dust, when stirred, can choke the air, blind the eyes, and settle into every corner, impossible to sweep away. I opened the drawer, touched the folder once more, and whispered, You wanted a fight, Claire. You'll have one, but it won't be loud. It will be patient, and it will be final. The following week unfolded like a play I hadn't auditioned for. Each day, Claire rehearsed her role as mistress of the house, parading through the rooms as if rehearsing for guests who had yet to arrive. She opened cupboards, made notes in a little leather-bound book, and once even called a contractor to assess the kitchen. I overheard her say into the phone, Yes, we'll remodel once the paperwork clears. It's basically ours already. I stood in the hallway, hidden in the shadows, my fists clenched. The gall of it astonished me, not just her ambition, but her certainty. She acted as though the ink on my life could be erased with a single stroke of her pen. Daniel grew quieter, caught between us like a rope pulled too tight. At dinner, he stared at his plate, answering only when spoken to. Claire filled the silence with her plans. Once we get things sorted, we'll host Thanksgiving here this year. Don't you think, Daniel? He muttered. Sure. She smiled, satisfied, then turned to me. You can come, of course. We'll save you a seat at the table. I swallowed my anger along with my food. That's generous, I said evenly, though inside the words burned. The more she spoke, the more I realized that this was not just about property or money. It was about control. She wanted the narrative to be hers, the history of this house rewritten with her name etched into its walls. One afternoon, I heard voices from the upstairs hallway. I crept closer, careful not to let the floorboards betray me. Claire's voice was sharp, hushed, but urgent. She's stubborn, Daniel. But she can't hold out forever. The lawyer already confirmed the main will. Once we manage her signature on the other documents, it'll all be clean. We can use the house as collateral, clear our debts, and finally move forward. Daniel's voice was low. But what if she refuses? Claire laughed, a cold sound that made my skin prickle. Then we make her uncomfortable enough that she has no choice. People her age don't like conflict. She'll give in. Trust me. I stepped back into the shadows, bile rising in my throat. So this was her strategy. Pressure, isolation, relentless insistence. She underestimated me, believing age had made me fragile, that grief had hollowed me out. She had no idea what grief can become when sharpened by betrayal. It hardens into resolve. That night, as rain pattered against the windows again, I pulled out the supplemental will and spread it across the dining table. Each clause gleamed under the lamp like a weapon polished and ready. I imagined Thomas's hand guiding the pen, steady, deliberate, protective. I whispered to him, "You gave me this armor. I'll know when to use it." The storm outside mirrored the storm in my chest. My hands trembled, not from fear but from the raw anticipation of confrontation. The next morning, Claire tried again. She placed a fresh stack of papers on the kitchen counter, sliding them toward me with a sugary smile. "Just need your signature here and here. It's really just a formality. Daniel already agrees." I looked at Daniel. He avoided my gaze, his jaw tight. I pushed the papers back toward her. "Number." Her smile froze. "Excuse me?" I said no, I won't sign. And if you ask me again, I'll consider it harassment. Daniel's head yerked up. Claire's face hardened. "You think you can stop this?" she hissed. I met her glare steadily. Not think, no. The silence that followed was sharp as broken glass. Finally, she grabbed the papers, shoved them back into her folder, and stormed out of the room. The slam of the front door echoed through the house long after she was gone. I sank into a chair, exhausted but resolute. It had begun. 2 nights later, the whispers reached me again, this time from my sister-in-law who called late in the evening. "Margaret, I need to tell you something," she said. "Claire's been telling everyone at church that you're stepping down, that the house is theirs now. People are already congratulating her." I didn't know what to say. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "Thank you for telling me. Let them talk. Words are wind, paper is stone." But even as I spoke, a cold determination settled over me. She was building her kingdom on sand, and I held the tide. The breaking point came when I found her in the living room one afternoon, rearranging the family photographs. She had moved my wedding photo from the mantel and replaced it with a glossy landscape print. My breath caught as I saw Thomas's face set aside on a side table, half hidden beneath a pile of magazines. "What are you doing?" I demanded, stepping forward. She didn't flinch. "Just updating the decor. This place needs a fresher look. Don't you think?" I lifted the photo, brushed the dust from its frame. "This is not decoration. This is history." She smirked. "History doesn't pay bills." Something inside me snapped. I set the photo back on the mantel, my voice rising for the first time. "This house is not yours, Claire. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. You can rearrange the pictures all you want, but you can't erase me." Her smirk faltered. For a fleeting moment, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. She picked up her folder and left without another word. That night, alone in the silent house, I felt the full weight of my solitude. My son had slipped beyond my reach. My daughter-in-law was circling like a hawk, and the neighbors whispered of my defeat. I sat in the dark, Thomas's pen in my hand, the supplemental will locked upstairs. Doubt clawed at me, whispering that I was too old, too tired, too outnumbered. But then I looked again at our wedding photo on the mantel. His eyes, steady and certain, reminded me of what I already knew. The fight was not about strength or youth, it was about truth. And truth, once spoken, cannot be silenced. I rose, squared my shoulders, and whispered into the quiet. "She thinks I am dust, but dust can choke the lungs, blind the eyes, and bury the proud. She will learn that soon enough." The storm inside me had transformed into something sharper, calmer, and infinitely stronger. I would wait. I would endure. And when the time came, I would open the folder and let the truth speak. The morning after that confrontation with Claire, the house felt eerily quiet. I walked through each room slowly, my footsteps echoing against the hardwood floors. The silence wasn't comforting anymore, it was watchful, tense, as if the walls themselves were waiting to see what I would do next. Dust motes floated in the sunlight that filtered through the curtains, swirling with every movement. I carried the supplemental will in my mind like a shield, but I knew paper could be challenged, twisted, even buried under louder voices. Claire was crafty, and her arrogance was only one part of her arsenal. She had charm when she needed it, and Daniel at her side, silent but complicit. If I confronted her alone, she would find a way to twist my words. I needed not just the truth, I needed someone who could stand with me when the storm broke. That thought led me to the one person Thomas had always trusted besides me, Mr. Carter, our attorney. I called his office that afternoon, my fingers trembling as I dialed. Mr. Carter, this is Margaret. Could we meet privately? There are documents Thomas left. Something I think you need to see. His pause was brief but weighted. Of course, Mrs. Hale. Come by tomorrow morning. Bring everything. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house set my nerves on edge. At one point, I thought I heard the sound of the study door handle rattling. I crept upstairs, heart hammering, but found nothing, only shadows stretched long in the moonlight. Still, I locked the drawer again and slipped the brass key under my pillow. If Claire ever suspected what I had, she would not hesitate to search for it. The next morning, I carried the folder pressed against my chest under my coat, the weight of it grounding me. Mr. Carter welcomed me into his office, lined with shelves of law books that smelled of ink and leather. He motioned for me to sit and offered tea. I found this, I said, laying the supplemental will on his desk. My voice shook. Thomas prepared it before he died. He never mentioned it during the earlier reading. Mr. Carter's brows knit as he untied the string. His eyes scanned the pages, his finger tracing each clause slowly. After several minutes, he leaned back, exhaling. This is valid. Signed, dated, notarized, and it supersedes the earlier draft we read at the meeting. Margaret, this changes everything. Tears pricked my eyes. So I'm not imagining it? I still have rights? This house, my life, he protected me? Mr. Carter nodded firmly. You have every right. Claire may try to argue, but the law will hold. The problem, however, is perception. If she spreads lies and convinces others before this comes to light, you could face unnecessary battles. He swallowed hard. She's already doing it. The neighbors, the family, everyone thinks I'm leaving. She's rewriting history before it happens. Mr. Carter folded his hands. Then we must be strategic. Don't confront her yet. Let her show her hand, and then we reveal this at the proper time. I'll stand with you. Those words steadied me more than the paper itself. For the first time, I felt less alone. Back at the house, I kept my composure. I cooked dinner as usual, setting the table with the floral plates Thomas had loved. Claire breezed in, phone pressed to her ear. Yes. We'll have the equity ready in a few weeks, she was saying. The refinance is practically a done deal. She froze when she saw me standing there, spoon in hand. I raised an eyebrow. Business call? She forced a laugh. Just a friend. Daniel came in moments later, looking weary. He kissed her cheek, then sat heavily at the table. Long day, he muttered. I placed the roast chicken on the table. Eat then. Food doesn't argue. Dinner was strained. Claire chattered about renovations. Daniel nodded occasionally, and I ate quietly, my mind racing. Each word she spoke was a brick in the wall she was building around me, but in my purse sat the hammer that could shatter it all. A few days later, fate handed me an unexpected ally. My neighbor, Evelyn, stopped by with a pie, her face pinched with concern. Margaret, I didn't know what to say at church yesterday. Claire was telling people you'd be moving out soon. She even hinted the house would be theirs by summer. My hands tightened on the dish. She said that publicly? Yes. People were congratulating her. I thought you should know. Evelyn leaned closer, lowering her voice. I don't believe her. I remember Thomas. He would never have left you unprotected. If you need someone to stand by you, I will. Emotion swelled in my chest. Thank you, Evelyn. More than you know. That night, I placed Evelyn's pie on the counter untouched. It wasn't the dessert I needed. It was her faith, her willingness to speak the truth when others stayed silent. One evening, I overheard Claire again, this time on the back porch. The cicadas hummed loudly, but her voice cut through. Once she's out, I'll finally breathe. She clings to this house like it's her throne, but she can't last. She doesn't even realize how powerless she is. I stepped onto the porch, the wooden boards groaning beneath me. Powerless? I asked. She jumped, spinning around, her phone clattering to the ground. Her smile reappeared quickly, brittle as glass. Just a figure of speech. I bent, picked up her phone and handed it back. Words matter, I said softly. So does paper. Her smile faltered, but she said nothing, retreating inside with quick steps. The days blurred together, but my resolve sharpened. I began collecting small pieces of evidence, receipts she left carelessly, overheard comments from neighbors, even the faint smell of expensive perfume on Daniel's shirts that didn't belong to her. Each fragment was a thread in a web I would weave when the time came. One night, as I sat in the study rereading the will, Daniel entered quietly. He looked tired, older than his years. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "Claire says you're making things difficult. Why can't you just let us take over? It would be easier for everyone." I looked up, my heart heavy. Easier for her, maybe. Not for me. Not for your father's memory. He shifted, uncomfortable. "She's my wife. I have to stand with her." "And I am your mother," I replied. "One day, Daniel, you'll realize which of us truly stood with you." He left without answering, the door clicking shut behind him. I sat in the silence, tears slipping down my cheeks, but my grip on the folder remained steady. The turning point came one afternoon when Mr. Carter called. His voice was urgent. "Margaret, I've reviewed the documents thoroughly. They are airtight. If Claire pushes, she will lose in court. But you must be ready. She's moving fast." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I'll be ready. She won't expect what I hold." When I hung up, I felt a surge of power unlike anything since Thomas's passing. For weeks, she had spoken as though I were dust, a relic to be swept aside. But I was the one holding the foundation. Without me, her plans crumbled. I walked through the house, touching each wall, each frame, each memory. My hands no longer trembled. Instead, they itched with anticipation. She thought the game was hers. She thought my silence meant surrender. But soon, very soon, the silence would break, and the truth would roar louder than her lies. I stood by the window that night, watching headlights sweep across the driveway as Claire returned from another mysterious outing. She stepped out of the car, phone in hand, laughter ringing through the darkness. She didn't see me watching. I whispered into the glass, my breath fogging the pain. "Enjoy your victory lap while you can, because the finish line isn't where you think it is." The shadows in the room thickened around me, but I didn't feel fear. I felt steady, patient, waiting. The law was on my side, the truth in my hand, and soon the stage would be set. She believed I was cornered. She had no idea I was building the trap she would walk into with her own 2 feet. The sun rose too brightly that morning, pouring gold through the curtains as though mocking the heaviness in my chest. I stood in front of the mirror, fastening the pearl necklace Thomas had given me on our 20th anniversary. My fingers shook, not from weakness but from the storm brewing inside me. Today was the day Claire would learn that arrogance is brittle, and paper does not forget. I chose a charcoal gray dress that hugged my frame with quiet dignity, polished black shoes, and the silk scarf Thomas always said made me look unyielding. I wanted no one to look at me and see fragility. When I clasped Thomas's fountain pen into my purse, it was as if I carried his presence with me. At Mr. Carter's office, relatives were already gathering. The air was filled with whispers, coats brushing against chairs, perfume mingling with the faint scent of old books. The conference table gleamed under the lights, its surface like a stage waiting for the first actor to speak. And then she arrived. Claire swept in as if the room were hers, heels striking the floor in sharp rhythms. She wore a cream blazer, lips painted in that same blood-red shade she always chose for battles. Daniel followed, shoulders slouched, eyes downcast. His face bore the strain of a man stretched too thin between 2 loyalties. "Margaret," Claire's voice rang out, too loud, too sweet. "So glad you came. We were just discussing the renovations we'll make once everything is finalized. You'll love what we have planned." I set my purse gently on the table, letting her see the calm in my eyes. Renovations can wait. Paper comes first. The smile on her lips twitched, but she quickly masked it. She sat, lacing her fingers with Daniel's under the table, her nails tapping against his skin. Mr. Carter entered, carrying a thick folder under his arm. The murmurs died at once. He took his seat at the head of the table, adjusted his glasses, and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are here to clarify certain details regarding the estate of the late Mr. Thomas Hale." I felt the air tighten. Every breath in the room held hostage. Claire straightened in her chair, eyes gleaming. She believed this would be her coronation. "Mr." Carter glanced at me, then continued, "Before I proceed, Mrs. Hale has brought a document she wishes to share with all of you." All eyes turned. My pulse hammered, but I kept my face serene. Slowly, deliberately, I drew the slim folder from my purse, its string tied in a neat bow. I placed it on the table, the sound louder than I expected in the hush of the room. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is the final word of my husband." Confusion rippled through the group. Claire leaned forward, her smile thinning. "That's impossible. The will was already read. We've all seen it." "This," I repeated, untying the string, "is a supplemental will. Signed, dated, and notarized. It supersedes the earlier draft." I slid it across the table to Mr. Carter. He adjusted his glasses and began to read aloud, each clause ringing through the room like a bell. "The house shall remain under the lifetime occupancy of Margaret Hale. The business accounts shall be managed through a trust, inaccessible without her consent. Additional savings bonds are reserved for any future grandchildren." Gasps broke out. A cousin murmured, "Well, I'll be—" Another relative shook his head, astonished. Claire's face drained of color, then flushed scarlet. This can't be real. She forged it. She must have." Mr. Carter looked at her firmly. "I assure you, Mrs. Whitaker, this document is authentic. I was present when Mr. Hale signed it. So was another witness. Its legality is indisputable." The relatives buzzed louder now, voices overlapping. Unbelievable. I knew Thomas wouldn't leave her unprotected. Always said she was the backbone of this house. Claire slammed her palm against the table. "No, this isn't fair. We already made plans." "That's the problem," I cut in, my voice quiet but sharp. "You made plans for something that never belonged to you." "Abido." Daniel shifted, his eyes flicking from me to his wife. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Finally, he whispered, "Claire, maybe we should—" "Don't you dare," she hissed at him, her voice cracking. "Don't you dare side with her now." The room fell into a stunned silence. I folded my hands in my lap, the weight of the moment pressing against my ribs, and waited. The silence in the room felt almost physical, pressing against my skin, vibrating in my ears. Claire stood half-risen from her chair, her breath coming fast, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. Daniel still hadn't met my gaze. His head bowed, his fingers twisted together in his lap. Mr. Carter cleared his throat and tapped the pages with one finger. I must emphasize that this supplemental will is legally binding. There is no ambiguity here. Mr. Hale's intentions were clear, and he took the proper steps to ensure his wishes were respected. Claire's voice sliced through the air. "You're lying. You've always favored her. You're just twisting things to protect her." Mr. Carter bristled but remained calm. "I am an officer of the court, Mrs. Whitaker. My reputation stands on decades of service. If you wish to accuse me of falsifying legal documents, you may try, but you will fail. The notarization and signatures are indisputable." Murmurs swelled again among the relatives. Aunt Lydia leaned forward, whispering loudly enough for half the room to hear. "I knew Thomas was too smart to leave everything wide open. That girl has been bragging for weeks." Claire's face contorted, her polished veneer cracking. "This isn't about smart or not. It's about fairness. Daniel and I deserve this house. We've built our lives around it. We've already told people." "That," I said softly, "was your mistake." She whipped her head toward me. "What do you mean?" I lifted my chin, letting the hush settle again before I spoke. "You told everyone I was leaving. You told neighbors, people at church, even family. You painted me as a relic already gone. But the truth was here all along, waiting. Paper doesn't bend to arrogance, Claire. It waits for the right moment, then it speaks." Gasps rippled again. Evelyn, who had slipped quietly into the back row, stood then. Her voice was steady, ringing with conviction. "She's right. I heard Claire myself, telling people at church that she would be taking out loans on this house. She said Margaret was moving out, that it would all belong to her and Daniel by summer. The room erupted. Relatives' voices overlapped, a storm of disbelief and condemnation. Loans? On the family house? Shameless. Poor Thomas, turning in his grave. Claire's mouth opened and closed, her face crimson. She's lying. Evelyn has always been jealous of me. But Evelyn's gaze never wavered. I gain nothing from this. I only tell what I heard with my own ears. Daniel buried his face in his hands. His shoulders sagged as if all the air had been pulled from him. I watched him silently, my heart aching. He was my son, but he had let himself be molded. His spine softened until he bent wherever she pushed him. Claire's voice cracked now, desperation creeping in. You don't understand. We needed this. We had debts, plans, dreams. This house was our future. No, I said quietly. This house was never yours to gamble with. It was built on years of sweat, of faith, of love. Thomas and I poured our lives into it, and he made sure it would remain in the hands of someone who respected it. You're cruel, she spat. You're taking everything from us. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. You tried to take everything from me. Don't confuse justice with cruelty. The room hushed again, the weight of my words settling like dust. Mister. Carter closed the file with a deliberate snap. The matter is settled. The estate remains as written. Any further attempts to claim otherwise will not only fail but may be considered fraud. Claire sank into her chair, trembling, her hands balled into fists. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, a flicker of doubt beneath the rage. Daniel finally looked at me then, his face pale and drawn. Mom, he whispered, voice breaking. I didn't know Dad had done this. I studied him, my heart torn. And yet, you believed her. You let her tell you I was nothing. That is what hurts most. He flinched, lowering his eyes again. The relatives began to stand, the meeting dispersing in waves of whispers and sidelong glances. Some came to squeeze my hand, murmur their support. Others shook their heads at Claire as they passed, their disappointment heavy. When the room had thinned, Claire stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. She looked around wildly, as if still searching for someone to back her up. No one did. She turned to me, her voice trembling with rage. You think you've won, but you haven't heard the last of this. I met her gaze calmly. Perhaps not. But today, the law heard me, and it spoke louder than your lies. Her lips curled, but no words came. She stormed out, Daniel trailing after her, his shoulders slumped. The door slammed behind them, leaving the room vibrating with the echo. I exhaled slowly, my hands unclenching from fists I hadn't realized I'd made. My body trembled with exhaustion, but inside, a fierce calm spread. I had not only defended what was mine, I had shown her that dust, once stirred, can choke. But even as I gathered the papers back into my purse, I knew the battle was not entirely over. Pride like hers doesn't collapse in a single day. Pride lingers, festers, claws for scraps. And sometimes, desperation is louder than arrogance. Somewhere deep in my chest I felt it. She would return. But the next time, it wouldn't be with threats. It would be with tears. The room emptied slowly after Claire's stormy exit, but I remained seated for a while, my fingers brushing the edges of the folder as if it were a lifeline. The quiet after so much noise was almost deafening. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and I could still hear the echo of her heels pounding down the hallway. Mr. Carter lingered, tidying his papers. You handled yourself well, Mrs. Hale, with dignity. That's more than I can say for her. I nodded, my throat thick. Dignity is all I have left, Mr. Carter. If I lose that, I lose everything. He gave me a small smile. You have more than dignity. You have the law, and that is unshakable. When I finally rose and left his office, the late afternoon sun slanted across the parking lot, long shadows stretching like fingers across the pavement. I held the folder tightly against my chest as I walked to my car. A breeze carried the faint scent of lilacs from a nearby bush, a reminder that even storms end in blossoms. But the battle had left me drained. As I drove home, my body sagged against the seat, every muscle aching from the tension I had carried. Yet under the exhaustion was a pulse of triumph, quiet, steady, undeniable. That evening, I returned to the house that had been my prison and my fortress. The door creaked open to the familiar scent of lemon polish and roses from the vase I had placed on the counter. I paused in the doorway, letting the comfort of my home wrap around me like a shawl. Evelyn stopped by not long after, carrying a small casserole. She placed it on the counter with a warm smile. "I thought you might be too tired to cook tonight." Word travels fast, Margaret. People are talking, and this time they're talking with respect. I hooked her, my eyes misting. "Thank you, Evelyn, for speaking the truth when no one else dared." She patted my hand. She made herself look a fool today. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people reveal who they really are. Her words settled into me like balm. I realized she was right. Claire had destroyed herself more effectively than I ever could. Over the next few days, the ripples spread. Relatives who once avoided me now called to apologize for doubting. Neighbors stopped me in the yard to express support. Even the grocer, who usually kept conversation to the weather, said quietly, "Good for you, Mrs. Hale. Good for standing tall." But in the quiet hours, when I was alone with my thoughts, I felt a heaviness pressing down. It wasn't victory that weighed on me. It was the certainty that Claire would not let go so easily. She had invested too much pride, too many lies. Pride, when stripped, becomes desperation, and desperation is unpredictable. My premonition proved right sooner than I expected. One evening, I heard raised voices outside. Peering through the window, I saw Claire and Daniel in the driveway, arguing fiercely. His voice cracked. "You promised me. You said it was ours. Now I look like a fool." Her reply was shrill. "You were supposed to support me, not cower like a child." I stepped back into the shadows, heart aching as I watched my son's face crumble under her words. It struck me then that he was as much a victim of her hunger as I was, though his weakness had allowed it. The next morning, Daniel appeared at my door alone. He looked haggard, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I should have trusted you. I should have trusted Dad. I let her twist everything." I opened the door wider, searching his face. "Do you mean that, Daniel? Or are you just tired of fighting her?" His shoulders slumped. "Both." "Zero." I sighed, stepping aside to let him in. "You'll have to decide who you are, son. Not who she makes you, but who you are." He nodded, his eyes glistening. For the first time in months, I saw the boy I once knew. 2 days later, the begging began. I was in the garden, trimming the roses, when I heard the gate creak. Claire stood there, no makeup, her hair tied back hastily, her eyes swollen from tears. She looked nothing like the woman who had strutted into Mr. Carter's office in a cream blazer and heels. She looked small. "Margaret," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, I need to talk to you." I straightened slowly, shears still in my hand. "Talk then." She stepped closer, her hands clasped. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I let my pride blind me. But Daniel and we have nowhere to go. The debts? The house we thought we'd have? Please, just let us stay here, at least until we get back on our feet." "Our?" Her words spilled out like broken glass, sharp and desperate. The woman who once smirked and promised me dust now stood begging in the garden, tears streaking her cheeks. I felt the weight of the moment press against me. Triumph, sorrow, and pity tangled in my chest. This was not how I had imagined victory. Revenge had been clean and sharp in my mind, but reality was messy, full of broken people and shattered pride. I lowered the shears, meeting her pleading eyes. "You told me I would have nothing but dust, Claire. And now here you are, asking for shelter from the very dust you scattered." She sobbed, nodding. "I know. I was a fool. Please, please give me another chance." I didn't answer right away. The roses swayed in the evening breeze, their thorns catching the light like tiny spears. The air smelled of earth and blossoms, heavy with meaning. Finally, I said, "We'll see. But understand this. If you stay, it will be on my terms, not yours." Enomi 9. Her sobs quieted, her shoulders sagging with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. But as I turned back to the roses, I thought, this isn't mercy. This is justice. And justice sometimes means letting people live with the dust they created. 2 weeks after the confrontation at Mr. Carter's office, the house felt different. The air was lighter, as though walls that had braced for battle were finally exhaling. I walked the halls each morning, sunlight spilling across the polished floors, and I felt Thomas's presence more clearly than ever, not as a ghost, but as a quiet certainty that justice had been done. Yet justice is rarely neat. It leaves ripples, scars, and consequences that unfold long after the shouting ends. Claire had not disappeared after her humiliating defeat. Instead, she lingered at the edges of my days, her pride crumbling into desperation. The debts she had tried to cover with dreams of ownership came knocking, creditors calling, friends withdrawing their smiles. The woman who once strutted through rooms as though she owned them now walked with lowered eyes, her voice softened to pleading. Daniel, caught between shame and exhaustion, moved like a shadow. He came to me often in those weeks, sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. "I don't know what to do anymore, Mom," he confessed one evening. "She's not the same. Or maybe, she's always been this way, and I just didn't want to see it." I poured him coffee, the steam curling between us. "We all choose what we see, Daniel, but eventually, truth doesn't give us a choice. It forces our eyes open." He looked up, tears brimming. "Do you hate me?" The question cut deep. I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. "No, son, I hate what you allowed. But you are my child. That will never change." His shoulders shook with silent sobs, and I realized that forgiveness could coexist with disappointment, that love does not erase mistakes but survives them. Claire's desperation grew until one evening, she stood in my garden, tears streaking her face, begging for shelter. "Please, Margaret," she whispered, her voice breaking. "We have nowhere to go. Just let us stay, at least until we can breathe again." The memory of her smirk at the inheritance meeting flashed through my mind, her promise that I would get nothing but dust. How quickly the wind had shifted. I considered the roses around us, their blossoms heavy with fragrance, their thorns glinting in the fading light. "You may stay," I said finally. "But understand this. You live here under my rules. No more lies, no more schemes. You will respect this house, or you will leave it." "Endo." She nodded quickly, her relief palpable. "Yes, of course. Thank you. But gratitude is not the same as transformation." I knew that. She would live with the knowledge that her kingdom had been dismantled by her own pride, that she survived now only by my allowance. That was punishment enough. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a fragile rhythm. I tended the roses, cooked dinners, and walked the halls at night without fear of being erased. The neighbors greeted me with warmth again. Evelyn often stopped by, bringing pies and quiet companionship. Claire kept to herself mostly, her laughter muted, her presence subdued. Sometimes I caught her staring at me with a mixture of resentment and awe. Perhaps she realized that true strength doesn't always roar, it can whisper, wait, and strike at the right time. Daniel worked longer hours, trying to mend the cracks in his life. He came home tired, but his eyes slowly cleared of the fog that had once clouded them. Sometimes, late at night, I heard him and Claire arguing softly in their room, voices muffled but sharp. That was their burden to bear. For me, peace was not in their suffering, but in the knowledge that I had stood my ground without cruelty, that I had honored Thomas's foresight and my own dignity. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson. I thought of Thomas, of his quiet wisdom, of the way he always said, "Paper is patient, but truth is permanent." I whispered into the fading light, "We did it, love. We kept what was ours." The roses swayed in the breeze, their scent wrapping around me like a promise. And now, I turn to you, the one who has walked through this story with me. Tell me, if you were in my place, would you have let Claire stay under your roof after everything she did? Or would you have cast her out to face the world alone? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Because this story may be mine, but the questions it raises belong to all of us. Stay with me, because the next chapter, another tale of family, betrayal, and justice is already waiting. And trust me, You won't want to miss what comes when secrets are dragged into the light.